My name is Graham Kelton. The day I saw my name erased from the very project I built, with my own 2 hands and heart, I froze. No confrontation, no warning. Just silence where there should have been credit. It broke something in me. But I didn't scream. I walked out, with my dignity, not just my resignation. If you've ever been pushed to the edge, quietly, listen to my full story. And tell me, did I do the right thing by walking away? Would you have done the same? I still remember that Monday morning. The sky was the same overcast gray it always is in Seattle, with a soft, misty rain tapping gently against the windows. I had my usual, an iced latte from Lavender Drift, extra espresso, light ice. I got to the office before most folks, like always. I like the quiet. There's something comforting about hearing your own footsteps on the tile before the chaos of the day begins. Bright Layers building sat on the edge of Pioneer Square, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, like it wanted to pretend we weren't just another startup burning investor money faster than our code could compile. I took the elevator up to the 5th floor, logged in, and opened the shell to check a few test cases I'd been fiddling with all weekend. Just habit. My body moved like muscle memory, but my brain, it was foggy that day, like something was about to crack loose, and I didn't know what yet. I only went to the printer because I was trying to do someone a favor. Jacob, one of the new hires, had sent a huge slide deck to the wrong floor's queue. I figured I'd just swing by, grab it, and drop it off on my way to get another coffee. That's all it was supposed to be. But when I picked up the pages, I saw something that made my chest tighten. Product Vision, Novo Suite AI, a modular intelligence stack for small business applications. That was my title. I mean, maybe not those exact words, but that idea, that framing, that interface layout on slide 7, that integration schema on slide 10, all mine. I'd drawn it on a whiteboard with a dying marker 6 months ago in this very office, standing next to Delaney Shore with cold pizza in my hand and sleep-deprived eyes. We had talked for hours that night, dreaming up the thing like 2 kids building a treehouse out of old tools and wild ambition. It wasn't official company scope. Back then, it wasn't even real. Just sketches. Ideas we were maybe gonna explore. And now it had a logo, a roadmap, a launch date. I flipped further. Slide after slide, bullet points worded just the way I would have said them. Then I hit the team section, product development timeline. Milestones, phases, contributors. No mention of me. Not a single line. At first, I thought maybe I was missing something. Maybe it was an early draft. Maybe I was listed in another section. I flipped through it twice, slower the second time, but nothing changed. That's when Jacob came walking in behind me. Oh, hey, thanks for grabbing that. He smiled like any kid would. Crazy thing, huh? Delaney said she cooked up the whole Novo Suite concept herself during her Tahoe retreat. Said she couldn't sleep one night and just started sketching. Wild, right? I didn't respond. I just nodded and handed him the stack. I went back to my desk and sat down. Didn't touch the keyboard for a while. I kept replaying those words. She cooked it up herself. Like it had come to her in a dream. Like everything I'd put together over months was just never there. It wasn't the first time someone had polished up a group effort and presented it like it was theirs. That happens in tech. People cut corners. People forget who was in the room when something was born. But this felt intentional. It felt sterilized. Like someone had scrubbed my fingerprints off the glass and put their name on the frame. I stared at my monitor for what felt like an hour. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe there was a different version. Maybe this wasn't final. Maybe she just forgot. But that didn't make sense either. Delaney was sharp. Always has been. Too sharp to forget something like this. Back when we were sketching this idea together, she told me, if we make this work, we'll share the spotlight. Founders, builders, side by side. I believed her. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because after all these years in the industry, I thought I'd finally found someone who got it, who saw beyond titles and credit, who cared about the build more than the brag. But looking at that slide deck, I felt like a ghost watching someone else live my life. I didn't yell, didn't storm out, just closed my laptop and sat there, letting the rain blur the city outside the window. Something inside me shifted. Not rage, not sadness. Something colder. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not that day. I just remember walking past the printer again on my way out, pausing for a second, and thinking how strange it felt to be erased without anyone noticing. I didn't say a word, but in that moment I knew. Maybe everything I thought this company was, everything I thought she was never real to begin with. And God help me. I wasn't even angry. Just cold. Real cold. I didn't say a word to Delaney that day. Didn't even look her way when we crossed paths by the coffee machine. She was laughing with someone from marketing, sipping a matcha latte, completely at ease. Meanwhile, I was walking around like I had something jammed between my ribs. I tried to keep my head down, keep coding. Tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a mix-up. Maybe there was another version of the deck somewhere that had my name on it. Maybe I'd get an email later that afternoon saying, "Sorry, we forgot to include you. That was a draft." But it never came. The silence stretched into something permanent. It got harder to concentrate. I'd type a few lines of code, then just stare at them like they weren't mine. I must have read the same email 3 times in a row without absorbing a word. And all I could think was, if she didn't even think to mention me, what else was she planning to cut? By Wednesday, I'd had enough of stewing in my own head. So I texted Marvin. "Coffee." He replied with just a thumbs up and the words, "Same place, 5:30. Lavender Drift was only 3 blocks from the office, a little hipster spot with creaky floors, and a window seat Marvin always claimed before sunset. He liked to get there early, order something he didn't understand off the seasonal menu, and read the paper like it was 1974. When I walked in, he was already halfway through a scone, glasses perched on the end of his nose, reading a folded printout of the New York Times like it was the Holy Gospel. "You look like someone just knocked over the altar at your company's church," he said without looking up. I pulled out the chair across from him and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "That obvious?" He closed the paper and set it aside. "To anyone who's been around long enough, yeah." I told him everything. The slide deck. The missing name. The way Delaney had told me months ago that we'd build it together. And now, somehow, she decided she built it alone. Marvin didn't blink. He just sipped his coffee and nodded like he'd heard it all before. "I got iced out of a patent once," he said. Mid-90s. Voice recognition engine for car dashboards. My CTO took the white paper, polished it up, slapped his name on it, and flew to Vegas to present. They sent me a thank you card and a fruit basket. I chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "What did you do?" "I stayed," he said, staring at the cup between his hands. "For 2 more years. Figured I'd win them over, show them I was indispensable. Turns out, all I was doing was telling them I'd tolerate being invisible." I didn't say anything. He leaned back, eyes sharper now. "So, tell me something. Do you really believe Delaney forgot to include you? Or do you think she meant to leave you out?" I looked away. "That's what I thought," he said. "You can make excuses for her, but your gut already knows." He picked up a sugar packet and turned it between his fingers. "Here's the thing, Graham. People like her, they don't make mistakes like that. They build clean narratives. They decide who's visible and who's supporting cast. And once they decide, they don't look back." I rubbed the side of my jaw. "I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt." "Sure," he said, smiling a little. "You always do. That's your thing. But let me ask you this. Do you want to spend the rest of your life inside a system that forgets who sweat for it?" I sat there quiet. The noise of the cafe faded into a dull hum. People came and went, baristas called out names, someone spilled milk near the counter. But I wasn't hearing any of it. I was somewhere else entirely. 6 months ago, back in the office late at night, showing Delaney the first mock-ups. Her eyes lighting up. Her saying, "This is big, Graham. This is it." And now I was sitting in front of a man who'd lived long enough to see what happens when you bet on the wrong people. "What would you do if you were me?" I asked. Marvin didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, watched a kid in a puffer jacket try to unlock a bike with mittens on. "I'd stop pretending loyalty is the same as purpose," he said finally. "I'd figure out where I left my self-respect and go get it." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew the answer. That night, walking back to my apartment through the drizzle, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not anger. Not clarity. Just a kind of quiet readiness I hadn't felt in a long time. The thing about silence is that it never comes all at once. It creeps in, like fog rolling across a lake. You don't notice it until the horizon's gone, and you're standing there alone, blinking into the gray. That's how it started after the slide deck. No confrontation. No email. No sudden shift. Just quiet. Delaney stopped making eye contact. When she passed me in the hallway, it was like I'd become part of the decor, something to walk around, not engage with. The small talk dried up. I wasn't invited to design reviews, and I wasn't CC'd on sprint planning anymore. Then came the email. It was short. 2 sentences. We've realigned teams to better match the current roadmap. You'll be taking lead on infrastructure legacy stabilization. Legacy stabilization. That was code for keep the old pipes running while the rest of us build the future. It was the kind of work you handed to someone you didn't want to fire, but also didn't want around the table. I walked down the hall and knocked on her office door. She didn't look up right away, just motioned for me to sit. You reorganized the Novo Suite team, I said. Yes, she replied, still typing something on her laptop. We needed a tighter loop. More agile minds. I didn't say anything. She looked up then. Her tone didn't change. This project's moving fast, Graham. I need people who can sprint, not marathon. I helped build the architecture that made this sprint possible, I said. My voice was calm, but I could hear it trying to hold steady. Delaney just shrugged, almost apologetically, but not quite. And that work was appreciated. Truly. But let's be honest, you're not the best fit for where we're going. The way she said it, clean, professional, almost friendly, was somehow worse than if she just yelled at me. Like I was a tool she'd finished using and was now putting back in the drawer. I stood up. Thanks for the clarity. She smiled as if we'd just wrapped up a strategy session. Keep me posted on the infrastructure handoff, will you? Back at my desk, I stared at the monitor for a long time without touching the keyboard. I wasn't sure what to feel. Betrayal doesn't hit like a thunderclap. It's more like a low, dull ache that starts in your chest and spreads outward until it fills you. I kept thinking about all those late nights, all the coffee-fueled whiteboarding sessions, all the emails labeled just between us, where we mapped out the future. And now, I was on the outside of the very thing I helped imagine. A couple days later, a kid named Ethan stopped by my desk. New hire. Smart. Still had that wide-eyed look in his face, like everything he touched might turn into gold. Hey, you're Graham, right? He asked. Yeah. I was poking around some of the archived repositories for context, he said. I saw your name on an early commit for the prototype. Pretty sure it was called Nova C Dev. It's locked now, though. Did they archive that because the naming changed? I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I opened my terminal, typed in the access path to the repo, and got the message I hadn't seen before. Permission denied. I closed the window. Ethan didn't catch the shift in my face, or if he did, he was polite enough not to mention it. They must have shuffled permissions around, he said. Happens. Yeah, I said. Happens. He nodded and wandered off, none the wiser. But I knew. They hadn't just moved me off the project. They'd erased me from its foundation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades blur into nothing. I kept hearing Delaney's voice. You're not the best fit. Like I was a pair of shoes she didn't need anymore. The next morning, I came into work early. I logged in and checked my access again. Still locked out. I opened a chat to ask IT about it, but then stopped mid-message. What was I even doing? Around 10, Delaney walked by my desk. She paused. You should focus on the infrastructure migration, she said, tone flat. Your contribution to Nova Suite was limited. Let's not complicate things. And that was the worst part. Not that she'd taken a project. Not even that she'd cut me out. It was the way she said it, like she was rewriting the history in real time, right to my face. As if I'd never mattered. As if the blood and sweat I'd poured into that idea had evaporated the moment she decided it was hers. I nodded once. Didn't respond. Just watched her walk away. It was a kind of Seattle Saturday that looked like it had been left out in the rain too long, cold, soggy, and gray from the inside out. I'd been avoiding my apartment's second bedroom for weeks. That's where I kept the spare monitor, the old ThinkStation, the external drives labeled in Sharpie from jobs that didn't exist anymore. But something pulled me in that morning. Maybe it was restlessness. Maybe it was just time. I booted up the old tower, half expecting the hard drive to fail. When the fans whirred to life and the screen lit up with a familiar login prompt, I sat back, surprised at the little sense of gratitude I felt. I hadn't used that machine since before NovoSuite had a name, back when it was just AI_SMB_sandbox in a folder I never meant to share. I clicked through the directories, poking around like someone leafing through a box of forgotten photos. That's when I found it. The demo. The real one. Not the polished slides Delaney had debuted, but the bare-bones prototype with rough transitions and half-broken logic blocks. My logic. My notes. My mess. And there it was, at the root of the folder, a PDF. Initial_concept_note.pdf. I opened it. My pulse actually kicked up a notch. It was the doc I'd sent to Delaney on a late November evening, time-stamped 11:12 p.m. It included screenshots, diagrams, and that same phrase I remember typing with a stupid kind of hope. Let's build this together. I scrolled to the bottom. There, in a reply email that had been auto-attached during the export, was her response. This is brilliant. I won't forget who built it. I leaned back and stared at the screen. I didn't feel vindicated. Not really. I felt sad. Because I think part of me still wanted to believe she hadn't meant to erase me. But this proved she knew exactly what she was doing. She just decided later that it was more convenient to forget. I printed the PDF. Backed it up to a USB, compressed the entire directory into an encrypted zip, and emailed it to myself at a personal address I hadn't used since my last job. I wasn't doing it to start a war. I wasn't planning a lawsuit. I just wanted the truth to exist somewhere other than inside my head. That evening, I met Marvin again. Same spot. He ordered a turmeric latte and didn't even make a face this time. You look like a man who just opened a tomb, he said, not even glancing up. I nodded, set the printed copy on the table between us. What's this? He asked, flipping through it. Proof, I said. Of the beginning. He gave a low whistle. She put that in writing? Back then, yeah. He studied it for a while, then looked at me across the rim of his cup. So now what? You gonna shove this in her face? Send it to her board? I shook my head. No, that's not what this is. Then what is it? I hesitated before answering. The words came slow, measured. I just need to know that if I walk away, I'm not leaving behind the best part of myself. I need to know I can go without erasing me, too. Marvin nodded, slowly. You're not a vindictive man, Graham. Never were. I exhaled. I don't want revenge. I want peace. And I want to leave with my integrity intact. He leaned back. That's harder than you think. Yeah, I said. But it's the only thing worth doing. We sat in silence after that. Outside, the sky was shifting to dusk, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I watched the rain trail down the glass like tiny veins. The next morning, I opened my inbox and saw it. Team announcement, NovoSuite pitch event, Monday, 10 a.m., Conference Hall B. It was happening. She was taking it public. Our idea, her presentation, no mention of me. I closed the email without reading further. My hands were cold, but steady. The room was quiet except for the sound of my own breath. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. Just clarity. I wasn't going to stop her. I wasn't going to beg for credit. But I wasn't going to be part of the illusion, either. Not anymore. I pulled up a new document and typed out my resignation letter. It was short, respectful, direct. And then, in a separate file, I wrote something just for myself. I don't need to prove I was right. I only need to make sure I wasn't complicit. Then I saved it, closed the laptop, and finally, after all these months, I stood up. Sunday morning found me in the same pew I'd been sitting in since I moved to the East Lake neighborhood. Third row from the back, left side, right under the stained glass panel with the tree and the dove. It wasn't habit, exactly. It was more like a place where the noise couldn't reach me. No phones, no sprint reviews, no slideshows with my work and someone else's name on it. The pastor that day was reading from Proverbs. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that doesn't try to impress you, just invites you to lean in. Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than one who is crooked in speech and is a fool. I wrote it down in my little pocket notebook. No embellishments. Just the words as they were. Back home, I made coffee I didn't really want and sat at the dining table with my laptop. The place was too quiet, the kind of silence that lets your doubts echo around until they start to sound like facts. I opened a new document and started writing. Dear Delaney, it was never about credit. I didn't care whose name came first or who got to hold the mic at the investor pitch. I cared about building something honest, something that mattered. The letter poured out of me. I didn't try to sound polished. I just let the words come, how the idea had started, where it came from, the nights we stayed late sketching workflows on the glass walls of the office, joking about what we'd call the platform if it ever became real. I reminded her of the version of herself that said, "Let's build this together," and how quietly that version had disappeared. I didn't accuse her of theft. I didn't call her names. I just wrote, there are things that, if you have to be reminded of them, it's already too late. When I finished, I stared at the screen. My finger hovered over the send button. And then I closed the window. Not minimized, closed. I sat there for a while, hands folded in my lap, looking at nothing in particular. It hit me like a slow tide. If Delaney had intended to give credit, she would have done it. If she'd meant to honor the partnership, it would have shown up in the work. I didn't need to remind her. She didn't forget. She chose. And I didn't want to spend another second offering explanations to someone who'd already made that choice. I opened a new file, typed up my resignation letter. 3 paragraphs, nothing dramatic. Just a clear, professional message. Thanked the team. Wished the company well. Then I printed it. I also drafted a meeting request and sent it straight to Delaney's assistant. 15 minutes, private, Monday morning. I didn't know what I was going to say, exactly. But I knew this wasn't about a contract anymore. This was about something quieter, something older, like self-respect. That night, I took a walk around Green Lake. The path was mostly empty, except for a couple of joggers and an older man throwing a tennis ball to a dog that didn't care much for chasing it. I thought about the past 10 months. All the hours. The missed dinners. The night I skipped my brother's birthday because we were trying to fix an API call that kept crashing during load tests. The hope that maybe, this time, I was building something that wasn't just product, it was purpose. Turns out, I was half right. It was purpose. But maybe not hers. Just mine. I walked until the air turned colder and the clouds started rolling in heavier. Then I went home, hung my coat, and set the resignation letter on the counter by my keys. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, which, for the first time in weeks, felt like something I could trust. And as I stood there, staring at that plain white envelope, I realized something else. I wasn't afraid of losing my job anymore. I was only afraid of losing the one thing that had always made the job worth doing, my own sense of who I was. And that was something I was finally ready to protect. Monday came like a slow tide. I woke early, though I hadn't really slept. I'd laid out everything the night before: press shirt, resignation letter, manila envelope. There wasn't much left to think about. No more angles to weigh. Just one final thing to do, and I wanted to do it with a clear head. The building buzzed with its usual start of week tension. People passed each other with half smiles and morning breath coffee, trying to look more awake than they felt. I walked past the break room without stopping. I didn't want small talk. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted closure. Delaney's assistant greeted me with her usual efficiency, barely looking up from her calendar. "She'll be with you in just a moment." I nodded, hands in my pockets, envelope tucked under one arm like it weighed nothing, though it felt like it held the entire past year of my life. When I stepped into the office, Delaney stood behind her desk, tablet in hand. She looked polished, rehearsed. Like always. "Morning, Graham," she said with a brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. I walked in, closed the door gently behind me, and sat down without waiting to be asked. I placed the resignation letter on her desk, then sat back. She didn't open it, just glanced at it, then at me. "Well," she said, crossing her arms. "I have to admit, I didn't see this coming. You've been a steady hand since the beginning." I didn't respond. After a moment, she sighed and placed the tablet down. "I think you're reacting emotionally. I get it, things shift, priorities evolve. It's not personal, Graham." I met her eyes. "It's not emotional. It's overdue. You've been with us since day one," she said, almost as if reminding herself. "But the company's growing fast. We're adapting. Not every contribution can be spotlighted." I nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for a spotlight. I never was." "Then what is this?" she asked, motioning to the letter. "Some kind of protest?" I leaned forward slightly, calm but firm. "This is me doing the one thing I still control, walking away with my name intact." She gave a tight smile, the kind you wear when you want to hide annoyance behind civility. "You know, this company is built on collaboration. No one gets full credit." "That would have made sense," I said, "if I hadn't seen a slide deck where my work showed up with your initials at the bottom." Her jaw tightened, just slightly. I didn't press. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my bag, pulled out a second envelope, and placed it next to the resignation letter. "I'm not leaving this to start something. I'm not leaking it to anyone. I'm just leaving it here. For the record." She glanced at it, but didn't touch it. "What is it?" "The original concept doc," I said. "The one I sent you last year. Your replies in there too, where you called it brilliant and said you wouldn't forget who built it." She stared at it, eyes unreadable, then leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You think this is going to guilt me into something?" "No," I said. "I think it's going to stay in that drawer and collect dust. But maybe someday, when the applause dies down and the meetings get quieter, you'll open it. And remember." She stood, slowly, as if trying to reassert control of the moment. "Do you really think walking away makes a point?" I stood too, collected, shoulders relaxed. "I'm not trying to make a point." She raised an eyebrow. "Then what's the goal?" I looked her in the eye and said, without hesitation, "I just don't want to become you." That landed. I could see it in the shift of her expression. Just for a second, the guard slipped. But she recovered fast, nodding once like it was all very business as usual. "Good luck, Graham," she said flatly. I picked up my bag. Didn't shake her hand. Didn't look back when I opened the door. I walked through the office with steady steps. Nobody knew. Nobody asked. I moved like a ghost passing through his former life. But when I stepped outside, into the sharp morning air, something lifted. I'd expected to feel fear. Or regret. But what I felt was lightness. I wasn't carrying the weight of pretending. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd finally let go of a lie. And that made all the difference. It had been exactly 7 days since I walked out of Brightlayer for the last time. A full week without Slack pings, status reports, or trying to explain to 28-year-olds why we shouldn't push broken code just to meet optics. I was at home that morning, halfway through sorting a closet I hadn't opened since pre-pandemic, when my phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Then again. By the time I finally picked it up, I had 6 messages from people I hadn't heard from in months. All some variation of, "Have you seen this?" I tapped the first link. It opened to an internal forum post from Brightlayer's Confluence page, screenshotted and forwarded to me by an old coworker. It was a slide deck uploaded by someone on the junior engineering team. The title read, "Initial Concept Proposal Novo Suite, version 1.1. Slide 2 had it, clear as daylight. Initial Concept by G. Kelton. There it was. My name, centered in plain text, the way it used to be before everything got cleaned up and sanitized. It turns out the young dev, in prepping an internal training module, had pulled the wrong version from the shared repository. He didn't mean anything by it, just clicked on the file with the earliest timestamp, figuring it'd give historical context. And it did. Too much, apparently. Later that afternoon, a former investor who'd sat in on one of our early demo calls called Delaney directly. "I thought Graham Kelton came up with this platform," he asked, according to someone in the room. She denied it. Said I'd been a contributor, sure, but the concept had evolved. "The current iteration is a result of many minds," she reportedly said. "Clean, safe, scripted." What she didn't know was that the slide deck had already been downloaded by 36 people and cross-referenced with commit logs still publicly visible on the Git server. The next day, a Seattle tech blog picked it up. One of the smaller ones, run by a guy named Russell who used to write obituaries for The Stranger. He didn't write in outrage. He just told the story. The title read, "The Forgotten Name Behind Novo Suite." It was a quiet piece. No accusations. No drama. Just timestamped screenshots, snippets from the concept PDF, my name on the commits, and a closing paragraph that read, "He left quietly, but his work never did." I didn't know it had gone live until I walked into Lavender Drift to meet Marvin and saw two people at the next table whispering over their phones. When I sat down, Marvin already had a copy of the article printed and folded next to his espresso. He didn't say anything, just pushed it across the table and gave me that look of his, the one with equal parts satisfaction and restraint. I took a sip of my coffee before opening it. Read it slowly, line by line. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting it settle. Not because it vindicated me, but because it existed. Because the truth, once buried, was now quietly breathing again. Marvin leaned back and finally spoke. "Didn't take much, did it?" "Nope," I said. "Just a forgotten file, and someone who didn't know to hide it." He chuckled. "Funny how that works." At Brightlayer, the fallout wasn't dramatic, but it was felt. Delaney called a team meeting 2 days later. She downplayed the article, talked about managing narratives, and protecting brand integrity. 3 engineers quit that same week. No emails. No drama. Just quiet resignations and forwarded job offers. None of them mentioned me. They didn't need to. The silence spoke loud enough. Back at the cafe, I folded the article and tucked it into my coat pocket. "I'm not going to share this," I said. "Didn't think you would," Marvin replied. "I'm not going on LinkedIn. I'm not tweeting a thread." "Good," he said. "That'd ruin it." I nodded. Because he was right. This wasn't a moment for revenge. It was a moment for something simpler, something smaller and stronger. I wasn't trying to reclaim a title. I was just reclaiming the truth. And sitting there, with a warm cup in my hand and my name printed where it belonged, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride. Not triumph. Just peace. And that was more than enough. It had been 3 weeks since I left Brightlayer. 3 weeks since I turned in my badge, stepped onto the elevator, and felt the tension in my shoulders start to melt away with every floor that dropped beneath my feet. I spent the first few days doing nothing. No emails, no resumes, no checking LinkedIn like a desperate habit. Just long walks, slow mornings, and a lot of staring out windows. I thought the quiet might drive me crazy. It didn't. It healed me. Then one morning, I got an email. Subject, opportunity to talk. The company was called Blue Willow Systems. Based in Portland. Not flashy. Not loud. I didn't recognize the name until I saw who it was from, Anika Morales, the CTO. We'd met once at a conference years ago. She'd read the blog. Her message was short. "We're not interested in you because your work was stolen. We're interested because of how you handled it." 2 days later, I was on a train to Portland, wearing a shirt that still smelled faintly like cedarwood from the closet. I hadn't done a real interview in over a decade. I half expected them to throw a whiteboard problem at me or grill me on frameworks like I was 25 again. But they didn't. They just asked one question. "If you build something here and it matters, do you want your name on it?" I didn't even have to think. "Yes," I said. "I do." They nodded. "Then you'll fit in just fine." When I got back to Seattle, I had an offer in my inbox before sundown. I accepted. Not out of spite. Not because I needed to prove anything. But because it felt right. For once, I wasn't stepping into someone else's spotlight. I was stepping into my own. That night, I got an email from Marvin. Subject, on leaving. The message was only 2 lines. Some people walk away from a job. Some walk away from themselves. You chose well. I didn't reply. I just read it twice, then sat back and let it settle. As for Delaney, she stayed on as CEO. No one dragged her through the mud. There was no expose, no scandal. But NovoSuite never made it past its second funding round. One investor pulled, then another. The pitch lost its shine. The numbers lost their momentum. And quietly, behind closed doors, people remembered. That article stayed in the search results. The screenshots were still floating around. And every time Delaney spoke at a new event, someone in the crowd whispered, "Wasn't she the one from that story?" The reputation she tried to polish never quite came clean again. But I didn't post about it. Didn't tweet, didn't sue, didn't write a think piece. I didn't need to win. I just needed not to be erased. There was a moment, just after I'd accepted the job at Blue Willow, when I sat down at home, opened my old laptop, and pulled up the very first demo of what we called NovaStack back then. It still ran, glitchy in places, but functional. I watched the loading screen cycle through, the little pixelated logo spinning like it had somewhere to be. I didn't open it to reminisce. I wasn't chasing some nostalgic ache. I opened it to say thank you to the part of me that kept building, even when no one was looking. People ask me sometimes, how did you walk away so easily? And I tell them the truth. I didn't walk away. I just stopped staying in a place that no longer made room for the best parts of me. Now I'm building again. Not from scratch, but from exactly where I should have started all along. Myself. Before I go, I just want to leave you with this. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't being hurt. It's choosing not to let that hurt change who you are. I didn't stay to fight. I left to protect the part of me that still believed in doing things the right way. Have you ever been in that place where walking away felt like the only way to stay whole? If this story stirred something in you, I hope you'll stick around for the next one. Maybe we'll find even more of ourselves in it together.